Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading from UPSC Civil Services examination perspective. Let's take up these important news which has appeared in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 5th July 2023, and the timestamp for these news has been provided in the YouTube description. So on this note, let's start our today's discussion from prelims and mains perspective. Let's start our discussion with this first article appearing on page number 8 in the editorial section. And this news appears as a lead article, and it highlights that a macro view of the fiscal health of states. So this article basically talks about the fiscal or the financial health of major states. And this article overall gives statistics of 17 major states from where statistics was possible. So this article highlights that the fiscal health or the financial health of states or different states in the country is very important for the overall fiscal health or the financial health of the country. And in this regard, this article gives a very detailed analysis with respect to how the situation was during the COVID times, that is how the earnings of the states declined, because majority of the portions of the earnings, especially during the COVID, was spent on healthcare facilities. However, post-COVID, we have seen improvement with respect to the finances of the states. Now, when we say improvement, we means that state have started earning the revenues. So it is in this regard, this article discusses in detail about the situation of fiscal deficits of different states. And here the article highlights that comprehensive and updated understanding of states' finances is necessary because states mobilize more than one-third of total revenue in the country. States spend 60% of combined government expenditure, and states share 40% of government borrowing. So states play a major role with respect to the overall finances of the entire country. So it is in this backdrop this article highlights about the improvement with respect to the fiscal deficit situation of different states, and also certain challenges or specifically fiscal challenges which still remains. Now, before moving further with our discussion, let's first of all understand the term fiscal deficit. Now, very simply, fiscal deficit is the difference between total earnings or total revenue and total expenditure. Suppose the government is earning rupees 100 crores per financial year. However, the spending of the government or expenditure on various aspects of the government is rupees 120 crores. So we see that the spending or the expense of the government finances is more as compared to its earnings. And the situation where the total expenditure of the government is greater than its earnings or revenue is termed as fiscal deficit. So it says that fiscal deficit is the condition when the expenditure of the government exceeds its revenue or exceeds its earning in a given financial year, and hence it is the difference between the two. Now, fiscal deficit is calculated both in absolute terms and also as a percentage of country's gross domestic product. So these are the two ways of calculating fiscal deficit. Now, we all know that in India we have a federal structure, that is, there is a union at the center and there are states and also union territories. So it is in this regard the state finances or the financial health of different states are important. And it is in this backdrop this article has given statistics with respect to 17 major states, which comprises of a combined spending of more than 90%. So overall, we can say that this is not the actual statistic, but very close to the real statistics. So in this regard, this article highlights about improvement in fiscal situation or financial situation of states, especially the major states, post-COVID. So it highlights that post-COVID, the general debt is declining post-COVID pandemic. Now, to understand that why debt is declining, let's come back to this definition of fiscal deficit. So we saw that the total expense was way more as compared to the total earnings. It was more than 20 crores. So the government has to take debt or take loan of these extra 20 crores from the bank. And hence in every fiscal deficit, there are certain debts to be paid. So it is in this regard, this article mentions about the state financial health, that yes, the fiscal deficit of the states increased, especially during COVID, but Post-COVID, we saw improvement in the finances as the total revenue or the total earnings of different states started to increase, and hence it improved the loan situation or the debt situation of different states. And with respect to this improvement, this article says that fiscal correction or improvement have been witnessed and statistics or data have been provided for such improvement of state finances. So at the union level, it says that the fiscal deficit declined from 9.1% of GDP in the year 2020-21 to 5.9% of GDP as per the budget estimate for the year 2023-24. Now you can see these two terms. Here I have mentioned about budget estimate and here it mentions about revised estimate. So let's understand this also. Now budget estimate is provided by the finance minister during her speech of the budget, and it mentions about various funds allocated by the finance minister to different departments, ministries or schemes for the coming financial year. So this is not the real picture but an understanding of data or statistics based on what is to be achieved in the coming financial year. Whereas revised estimates are those estimates which are revised based on the mid-year review by the finance minister or based on certain review. So suppose the budget estimate given by the finance minister was that the country was having a fiscal deficit of 4%. And this was based on the understanding that, say, the country would earn 200 crores in the upcoming year. But due to certain exigencies, the country was only able to earn rupees 160 crores. So the estimate which the finance minister had during her budget speech was disturbed due to certain elements or due to certain conditionalities or emergencies. And hence, the government also provide a revised estimate. Now it is also possible that the government estimated that the earning would be rupees 200 crores, but in reality the earning came to be or the earnings were actually rupees 240 crores. So this would be a better situation. So both situation may arise and hence the government also comes up with a revised estimate. Now with respect to states for the year 2020-21, the fiscal deficit was 4.1% of GDP. And this declined to 3.24% of GDP for the year 2022-23. So overall the fiscal health of states have improved, which also means that the earnings for most of these states have also improved. And for the year 2023-24, the fiscal deficit has further declined to 2.9% of GDP from 3.24% of GDP. Now this is again the budget estimate given by the finance minister. Still, this is a welcome news because it highlights that with respect to fiscal deficit, the total revenue have improved, and this has helped to reduce the debt burden of states, because this improvement in revenue have reduced the difference between total earnings and total expenditure of different states. So based on these understanding provided by these statistics, the overall analysis for major states with respect to fiscal imbalance and also consolidation has been provided for. So it says that states have managed to contain their fiscal deficit despite decline in revenue during COVID. And this is also because of improvement in the revenue situation of the states. It further says that spending on health during COVID by states alone was not easy, but was achieved with the help of union government. And hence, during COVID, the fiscal deficit increased, which means that the overall expense of the state improved, but the revenue did not improve that much. So the difference between revenue and expenditure increased. Another set of analysis is that states were able to reprioritize expenditure and quickly contain the fiscal deficit, especially post-COVID. Because after COVID, states were in a situation to spend comparatively less on healthcare facilities, which they had to do during the peak COVID times. And hence, it says that states were able to reprioritize their expenditure, especially on other areas other than health also. It further says that reduction in fiscal deficit also shows improved earnings or revenue for states. So obviously, improved earnings or revenue for states reduces this difference between revenue and expenditure, and it helps to reduce the overall fiscal deficit of states. and these improved revenue was with respect to improved GST collection of the union and states, higher distribution of tax revenues by union to states because of higher earnings post COVID-19 pandemic. And there was also improvement in non-GST revenue, particularly by states. That is, improvement in state finances, especially with respect to the local taxes or other state specific taxes. So these state specific taxes or state specific earnings also improved, which can be termed as non-GST revenue. That is, those revenue which does not come from GST. Now, if you look at this chart, it highlights the difference between GST collection in financial year 2021-22 as compared to GST collection in financial year 2022-23, which has been highlighted in yellow color. And as you can see, as we move from April towards March, it has significantly increased as compared to its previous year. So overall improvement in GST collection also helped the center to redistribute these taxes to the state governments. And all of these in a combined manner have helped states to improve their fiscal situation or financial health. Now moving further, this article suggests that despite improvement in earnings or revenue of states, the overall revenue deficit of major states has increased. So let's understand this concept of revenue deficit. Now, to understand revenue deficit, let's go through some of the basics with respect to Article 112 of the Indian Constitution, which mentions about annual financial statement. So this provision highlights that the President shall, in respect of every financial year, cause to be laid before both houses of Parliament statement of the estimated receipts and expenditure of the Government of India for that year, in this part referred to as the annual financial statement. So the annual financial statement reflects the estimated receipt and also the estimated expenditure for that year. It further says that the estimates of expenditure embodied in the annual financial statement shall show separately the following. A. The sums required to meet expenditure described by this constitution as expenditure charged upon the Consolidated Fund of India. The sums required to meet other expenses or other expenditure proposed to be made from the Consolidated Fund of India and shall distinguish expenditure on revenue account from other expenditure. So this aspect which provides that the expenditure on revenue account shall be distinguished or separated from other expenditure give rise to revenue budget and also capital budget. So revenue budget, just like fiscal deficit, also includes the earnings, which is also referred as receipts, and also expenditure. And some of the expenditures under revenue budget includes salaries, pensions, subsidies, and interest payments, where subsidies and interest payments becomes one of the major components of revenue expenditure. So based on this understanding, this article further highlights certain challenges with respect to rising revenue deficit of major states. And the major states highlighted here are Andhra Pradesh, Haryana, Kerala, Punjab, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu, and West Bengal. And these major states have increasing revenue deficit, and it is also important because these states contribute 40% to India's GDP. So with respect to challenges, this article suggests that fiscal deficit reduction, that is reduction in fiscal deficit, has not been accompanied by corresponding reduction in revenue deficit. Why? Because when the fiscal deficit of the states were high, then in that time the states had taken certain loans. And as of now, the state is making interest payment because of the loans which they had taken earlier. So this is one of the major reasons as to why fiscal deficit reduction has not accompanied by corresponding reduction in revenue deficit. So it also means that despite increase in revenue receipts, the expenditure on part of revenue still remains same or has increased. Another set of challenges as highlighted by the article is that constant increase in revenue deficit has long-term financial implications. So there is a need for correction in revenue account imbalance. So this increase of revenue expenditure by states with respect to say salaries or pension or subsidies or interest payments needs to be addressed. Along with increasing the avenues or opportunities for increased earnings or increased receipt. That is, the state should also look forward to improve or increase their overall earnings or receipt. And lastly, the article suggests that based on the report of Finance Commission, there has been an increase in fiscally stressed states or those states whose financial health is not good from 3 to 7. And these are those 7 states whose revenue deficit has increased, or we can say that their fiscal health is not up to date. So if we talk about these 7 states combined, then it highlights that these combined fiscal deficit of these 7 states is 3.71% of GSDP, that is gross state domestic product, whereas the average of all states with respect to fiscal deficit is 2.9%. So these 7 states have greater percentage in terms of fiscal deficit also. When we talk about combined revenue deficit of these 7 states, it is 2.15%. Whereas if we compare the combined revenue deficit of all states, it is mere 0.78%. And combined debt ratio for all these 7 states is also higher. And that is one of the major reasons as to why the Finance Commission has highlighted that these states are fiscally stressed, or there is fiscal imbalance with respect to earnings and expenditure in these 7 states. So the question is that what can be done to address this rising revenue deficit? The point highlighted by the article is that the center should provide interest-free loans to these states, and these interest-free loans may be linked to reduction in revenue deficit, which means that interest-free loan should be available only if state is able to reduce their revenue deficit. Now this will also help the states, and it will further prevent diversion of funds to finance revenue expense, and it will keep the financial discipline intact. The article says that there is a need for defined timeline to reduce revenue deficit. So the central government can provide for a defined timeline within which the state government needs to reduce their revenue deficit. An interest-free loan can be provided only in those defined time limit. It further says that performance incentive grant can also be considered as suggested by 15th Finance Commission. So there are certain performance incentive grants, that is, if states perform on certain criteria or parameters, then such grants can be provided by the center based on the 15th Finance Commission's recommendations. And in this regard, the recommendations of the 15th Finance Commission regarding performance incentives and grants includes: the Commission has recommended grant of rupees 4,800 crore, that is 1,200 crores each year from 2022-23 to 2025-26 for incentivizing the states to enhance educational outcomes. The Commission has also recommended that rupees 45,000 crore be kept as performance-based incentive for all states for carrying out agricultural reforms, for amending their land-related laws on the lines of Niti Aayog's model law, incentive-based grants to states that maintain and augment groundwater stock, growth in agricultural exports, and for carrying out reforms with respect to production of oilseeds, pulses, wood and wood-based products. So these are some of the recommendations of 15th Finance Commission regarding performance incentives and grants. So overall, this article suggests to reduce the revenue deficit of the states combined, including those 7 fiscally stressed states. And hence the article overall suggests that a comprehensive revenue deficit reduction framework is essential to improve the fiscal health or financial health of states. Thus, this article becomes very important with respect to your prelims and mains examination under GS paper 3 with respect to economy. Now, based on our discussion, this becomes your practice question for your mains examination. The question is, reduction in fiscal deficit of states has not been accompanied by reduction in their revenue deficits. Examine the statement based on financial health of states post-COVID pandemic, and this question carries 15 marks. Now let's take up this next news also on page number 8 in the editorial section. And this news is with respect to a latest Karnataka High Court judgment with respect to blocking of accounts by the government. So let's understand the background first. The Government of India, particularly the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, under Section 69A of Information Technology Act 2000, had blocked account of Twitter users. So Twitter, on behalf of these users, filed a case against the government's blocking orders. However, the Karnataka High Court has dismissed this petition filed by Twitter. And rather, the Karnataka High Court has imposed a fine on Twitter worth rupees 50 lakhs and said that the social media company had approached the court without complying with government orders. Now, another remark of the Karnataka High Court was that Twitter has no protection under Article 19 as it is a foreign company, and freedom of speech and expression under Article 19(a) is only given to citizens of India. So the High Court indicated that Twitter as a foreign company cannot claim the rights of freedom of expression and personal liberty guaranteed to Indian citizens under Article 19 of the Constitution of India. Now, this editorial basically is a critical analysis of the judgment of Karnataka High Court. In the very famous Shreya Singhal judgment, that is Shreya Singhal versus Union of India, the Supreme Court had held Section 69A of Information Technology Act as constitutional because there was a fair procedure provided under the law, and this fair procedure has been provided under the Information Technology Procedure and Safeguards for Blocking for Access of Information by Public Rules 2009, referred here in this article as blocking rules. So this lays down a procedure for blocking order issued by the government under Section 69A of the Information Technology Act 2000. So this editorial provides certain concerns or provides a sort of a critical analysis both with respect to the decision of the government and also with respect to the judgment of Karnataka High Court. Let's go through these concerns first. So overall, the concerns highlighted in this editorial is that power of government to restrict freedom of speech and expression has been provided under Article 19 Clause 2 and also Section 69A of Information Technology Act. So suppose these are the grounds of reasonable restriction provided under Article 19 Clause 2 and Section 69A of IT Act. So the question is that, can the government curb freedom of speech and expression on those grounds which are beyond this area, that is those grounds which is beyond Article 19 Clause 2 or Section 69A of Information Technology Act? The second concern highlighted is with respect to lack of procedural fairness. So it says that there was no notice given to the users, and hence the rules provided under Section 69A of Information Technology Act, particularly the blocking rules, were not followed by the government. So this amounts to procedural unfairness. The third concern highlighted is that there is lack of proportionality as the government suspended the Twitter accounts, and the suspension of Twitter accounts was based on certain posts which were either critical of the government, particularly on farm laws. So on one hand, there is procedural unfairness, that is no procedure was followed because no notice was given to the users. And secondly, the government suspended the Twitter account of users based on posts critical of the government. So this in a way contradicts the freedom of speech and expression given under Article 19(1)(a) of the Indian Constitution, which is also a fundamental right of any citizen. And another major concern highlighted in this editorial is that, based on Karnataka High Court ruling, Twitter cannot support the cause of its users who themselves voiced no grievances. So basically, Twitter, on behalf of their users, cannot file a complaint. So there is no locus standi for Twitter in this particular case because the users whose Twitter account was suspended did not raise any concern. So these are some of the concerns which have been highlighted in this particular editorial. Now, based on this understanding, let's go through the grounds of reasonable restriction as provided under Article 19 Clause 2 of the Indian Constitution and also Section 69A of IT Act. Now, as we all know that Article 19 provides for protection of certain rights regarding freedom of speech, etc. for its citizens. And Article 19 Clause 2 provides for certain reasonable restriction which the government can impose with respect to sovereignty and integrity of India, security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, decency or morality, in relation to contempt of court, defamation or incitement to an offence. Whereas Section 69A of IT Act mentions about power to issue directions for blocking for public access of any information through any computer resource. So basically, the central government has been empowered to block for public access any information through computer resource. Again, the reasons include in the interest of sovereignty and integrity of India, defense of India, security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, for preventing incitement to the commission of any cognizable offence relating to above. And non-compliance of provisions of Section 69A of IT Act is also liable for imprisonment for a term which may extend to 7 years and is also liable for fine. So these are the grounds on which the government can restrict freedom of speech and expression both under Article 19 of the Indian Constitution and under Section 69A of the Information Technology Act of 2000, which empowers the central government to block any social media accounts, including Twitter, where citizens express themselves. So blocking of these Twitter accounts were enabled by the central government under Section 69A of Information Technology Act 2000, which has been declared as constitutional under Shreya Singhal judgment, that is Shreya Singhal versus Union of India. Now the Shreya Singhal judgment declared Section 66A of Information Technology Act as unconstitutional and not Section 69A of Information Technology Act. And in this judgment, the Supreme Court declared Section 69A of IT Act as constitutional based on the procedural aspects provided under the specific rules. So it highlights that the Supreme Court upheld the validity of Section 69A and the blocking rules. That is the Information Technology Procedure and Safeguards for Blocking for Access of Information by Public Rules 2009. Now another reason as to why Supreme Court declared Section 69A as constitutional because it provided for procedural fairness. So it said that the court was satisfied that the process provided under the blocking rules, as it observed that sufficient procedural safeguards were embedded or provided under these rules, such as provision of recording a reasoned order, providing notice to the intermediary and the originator whose content was sought to be blocked. However, this aspect of Shreya Singhal judgment was not considered by the Karnataka High Court, as the Karnataka High Court held that the observations in Shreya Singhal judgment cannot be construed to mean providing notice to the users of the content, and that even if reasons are recorded in writing, they may not be conveyed to the users. So this is another concern expressed in this editorial, which highlights that the rules of Shreya Singhal judgment were not followed by the Karnataka High Court. And overall, this editorial suggests that not following the procedural safeguards runs contrary to judicial precedent as was declared in Shreya Singhal case and also to procedural safeguards provided under the blocking rules. And in absence of procedural safeguards, the restrictions that are to be imposed on free speech can be implemented without any oversight or without giving any recourse to the affected entity so that they can be challenged. So this lack of procedural safeguards further empowers the central government to take action under Section 69A of the IT Act. And the article further says that this also amounts to exercising unfettered power by the state, that is, absolute power by the state in taking down content, as it also affects one's freedom of speech and expression under Article 19(1)(a). So basically, empowering the central government under Section 69A of IT Act also affects one's freedom of speech and expression under Article 19(1)(a) of the Indian Constitution if procedural safeguards are not followed as provided under the blocking rules, as it gives unfettered power to the state. Now another reason which we have already highlighted is with respect to going beyond the grounds of restrictions provided under Article 19 Clause 2 to restrict freedom of speech and expression as provided under Article 19(1)(a). So here it says that reasonable restrictions on the fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression can only be instituted on the basis of 8 specifically enumerated grounds under Article 19 Clause 2 of the Indian Constitution. And we have already gone through these 8 grounds of reasonable restrictions, that is based on which state can impose reasonable restrictions on freedom of speech and expression. Further, the Supreme Court has also clarified in the Shreya Singhal case that blocking under Section 69A of IT Act and the blocking rules must also conform to those grounds only. However, in this case, it was highlighted that there were other grounds also which were invoked with respect to suspension of those rules. And these grounds was that those content which was published through Twitter could lead to spread of fake news. So the threat of spreading of fake news became one of the grounds on which the Twitter account was suspended, and also misinformation. So according to the government, fake news and misinformation had the potential to disturb public order and threaten security of the state. Now, this editorial contends that these two grounds, namely fake news and misinformation, are not provided specifically either under Article 922 or under Section 69A of Information Technology Act. Now, another point of concern is that contrary position was taken by the Karnataka High Court as compared to the other judgments of Supreme Court. So it says that the Supreme Court earlier has repeatedly held that for speech to be prejudicial to maintenance of public order, there must be a direct link between the speech and potential threat to public order, which means that it must be established that any particular speech may lead to threat of public order. However, in this case, the Karnataka High Court was convinced that these blocking orders were well reasoned, even though no nexus or no link could be established with respect to public order and the security of the state. So suspension of account based on certain contents which were published through Twitter, there could not be established a link as to such content could affect public order or security of the state. So these are some of the concerns which has been highlighted in this particular editorial with respect to the Karnataka High Court judgment, which has not only dismissed the petition filed by Twitter but has also imposed a fine or cost of rupees 50 lakhs on Twitter. Now this editorial gets covered under both GS Paper 2 and GS Paper 3. And if you look into the syllabus of GS Paper 3, it particularly gets covered under challenges to internal security through communication networks, role of media and social networking sites in internal security challenges, and under GS Paper 2 with respect to important aspects of governance. Now let's take up these two news appearing on page number 9 and page number 14. And these two news is regarding Centre's Open Market Sales Scheme or OMSS. Now this news says that Karnataka OMSS top beneficiary hit hard by discontinuation. Now it says that Karnataka bought over 50% of the rice sold through OMSS in 5 out of 8 years between financial year 2016 and financial year 2023. Now to understand this news, there is also certain political backdrop, as the Congress party in its political manifesto highlighted that it will provide 5 kg of rice to the poor households in addition to the rice provided under National Food Security Act. So whatever rice was provided under National Food Security Act, the Congress, if it comes to power, will provide 5 kg of extra rice. And what they thought was that they would purchase this 5 kg of extra rice under the centre's Open Market Sales Scheme. But the problem which arose was that on 13th June 2023, the central government discontinued sale of food grain under the Open Market Sales Scheme. So this is the political backdrop with respect to this particular news, and in this regard we need to understand Centre's Open Market Sales Scheme. Now this news on page number 14 says that Centre State tussle over OMSS may take spotlight at Food Ministers meet, as most of these states such as Jammu Kashmir, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana and Tamil Nadu, who are the highest beneficiary with respect to purchase of food grains under the Open Market Sales Schemes, have opposed this particular discontinuation of the central government. Other than this news appearing on page number 9 also highlights another aspect with respect to OMSS scheme. So let's understand this whole issue here. So it says that the Food Corporation of India sells surplus stocks of wheat and rice under Open Market Sales Scheme at predetermined prices through e-auction in the open market from time to time. And this is done to enhance the supply of food grains. But please understand, the main point here is that the FCI or the Food Corporation of India sells surplus stocks of wheat and rice. So there is always a possibility that this surplus stock of wheat and rice reduces. So under this OMSS scheme, that is Open Market Sales Scheme, food grain is provided. Generally wheat and rice is provided. And with respect to rice, it is provided for both consumption and also ethanol blending. And the opposition with respect to discontinuation of sale of food grain under the OMSS scheme is that rice is still available for ethanol blending, but rice is not available for consumption. So this is one of the opposition which certain state governments have raised against the move by the central government. Now it's important to understand that under the National Food Security Act, there are two types of households. Antyodaya households, which are poorest of the poor households, and these Antyodaya households are entitled 35 kg of food grain per household per month. And other than that, there are priority households who are entitled 5 kg of food grains per person per month. And in this regard, the state government of Karnataka had earlier promised to provide additional 5 kg of rice other than what is provided under the National Food Security Act. And the state government thought that it could procure such rice under centre's open market sale scheme. However, central government has discontinued sale of grain under the open market sale scheme. So because of this discontinuation, the state government of Karnataka was forced to give cash to the beneficiaries instead of additional 5 kg of rice, which they had promised to give under the Annabhagya scheme. Now, if you look into this particular chart as provided in this article, it shows that 6 states that bought the highest share of rice under the open market sale scheme. These 6 states are Jammu and Kashmir, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Tamil Nadu and Kerala. So other than Jammu and Kashmir, all the 5 southern states have bought highest share of rice under the open market sale scheme. Now this chart shows number of beneficiaries under the National Food Security Act and state-run schemes which provide food grains. And these states highlighted here are Karnataka, West Bengal, Telangana, Tamil Nadu and Kerala. And in all these states, there is substantial population or beneficiaries who get food grains under the state-run schemes other than the food grain obtained under National Food Security Act. Now the fourth chart highlights about supply of rice for the purpose of ethanol blending. And if you notice, from April 2021 till May 2023, the amount has been rising sharply. So greater amount of rice is being supplied for ethanol blending. Whereas if you look at the fifth chart, it shows the share of bulk consumers and states who purchased rice through the open market sale scheme. And as we can see, from 2017-18 till 2020-21, as highlighted here, mostly food grains have been purchased by states under the open market sale scheme. So because of this discontinuation, mostly the southern states have opposed the move of the central government. Now the question arises as to why the government has introduced these changes to the open market sale scheme. The first point is that it puts a restriction with respect to the amount or the quantity a bidder can purchase, and this has been limited to 100 metric tons. The second point is that to accommodate marginal buyers. So it says that this reduction in quantity aims to accommodate more small and marginal buyers, ensuring a wider reach of the scheme and immediate availability of stocks to the public at large. The third point highlighted here is exclusion of state governments. So it says that as a part of revised policy, the government has also decided to exclude state governments from the purview of OMSS to maintain adequate stock levels in the central pool of Food Corporation of India while controlling prices. So the two aspects are to maintain stock in the central pool of FCI and also to control price of the food grains. However, there is an exception with respect to these changes. The exception is that this scheme shall not apply to the northeastern states, hilly states, states facing law and order issues, or state facing natural calamities. So all these states can purchase food grains under the open market sale scheme. The next point is with respect to meeting other obligations. So it highlights that these changes made to OMSS scheme will also lead to higher availability of food grains for the department's other obligation, such as distribution of free food grains to 80 crore beneficiaries under Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana. So these can be said to be the reasons as to why recent changes were introduced to open market sale scheme of the central government, under which the central government discontinued sale of grains to states through OMSS And the main idea is to control inflation and also to maintain the adequate stock of food grain in the central pool of Food Corporation of India. Thus, this article becomes important, particularly under GS Paper 3 with respect to public distribution system, objectives, and issues of buffer stocks and food security. Now, based on our discussion, this becomes your practice question for mains. The question is, critically examine the decision of the central government to discontinue sale of food grains under open market sales scheme. And this question carries 10 marks. So, I hope after our discussion, you will be able to attempt this particular practice question. Now, let's take up this news appearing on page number 1. And this news says that SCO, that is Shanghai Cooperation Organization, calls for multipolar world order as Iran joins the grouping. However, this virtual summit also indicates lack of consensus. It says that India stays out of statements on economic cooperation and on China's Belt and Road Initiative, that is BRI, owing to China's projects in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. It further says that SCO calls for cooperation on digital payments and countering radicalization. So, this recent virtual summit of Shanghai Cooperation Organization witnessed the announcement of a more representative and multipolar world order, considering the fact that India, Russia, and China are also part of this global grouping. So, overall, this news highlights the key agreements signed at the summit and India's stance on certain issues and also the cooperative efforts of SCO member states. So, on this note, let's quickly go through some of the important highlights with respect to the virtual summit of SCO. So, the key points of SCO summit includes Iran's induction. So, Iran was included within the SCO and SCO welcomed Iran as its 9th member, signifying its commitment to inclusivity and expanding its regional influence. Another important point is India's dissent, as already stated, as India abstained from endorsing paragraphs related to China's Belt and Road Initiative in the joint statement. So, this also shows India's firm stand or firm commitment against China's belligerency around India's borders. And it also indicates lack of consensus within the grouping of SCO. Further, India also expressed its concerns over cross-border terrorism by Pakistan and China's connectivity projects which infringe on India's sovereign borders. One of the major highlights of SCO summit was New Delhi Declaration, as it can be said to be the outcome of the summit. So it says that the summit witnessed the signing of the New Delhi Declaration, which outlines areas of cooperation among SCO member countries. So let's go through these areas of cooperation which the SCO member countries have agreed to abide by. The first point highlighted here is opposition to militarization of information and communication technology. So the member states collectively opposed the militarization of information and communication technologies, emphasizing the need for universal rules and responsible behavior in this domain, considering the increasing cyber attack, especially emanating from China. The second point highlighted is with respect to the criticism of sanctions by individual countries, mainly the criticism of non-UN sanctions or those sanctions which are not led by United Nations. So it says that the SCO members voiced their disapproval of non-UN sanctions, deeming them incompatible with international law and detrimental to other countries. The third point is that the SCO member countries decided to explore the use of national currencies for intra-group payments, aiming to reduce dependence on international dollar-based transactions. The fourth point is with respect to commitment to peace and cooperation in the region, as SCO member states reaffirmed their commitment to peace, joint development and equal relations based on mutual respect, friendship and good neighborliness. The fifth point is that the SCO members agreed to combat illicit drug trafficking and also agreed to continue to implement the SCO anti-drug strategy and conduct joint anti-drug operations regularly. The sixth point is with respect to the concerns on environment, and here it talks about environmental protection and climate change, and member countries recognize the importance of cooperation in this field, including the cooperation in the field of environment protection, ecological security, and mitigating the consequences of climate change, as climate change knows no borders. The seventh point highlighted here is with respect to strengthening the World Trade Organization, as the members agreed that they need a more effective WTO as a platform to discuss the international trade agenda and adopting multilateral trading regulations. And the eighth point was that the member countries agreed for multilateral arms control, as the member states emphasized the use of political and diplomatic means to address global and regional security challenges, thereby actively promoting multilateral arms control, disarmament, and non proliferation process. So, as of now, these are some of the key highlights of the virtual SCO summit. And one of the key highlights is that Iran has been welcomed or included as SCO's ninth member. Now, you can tell me in the comment section which are the other 8 member states of SCO, that is Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now, this news on virtual SCO summit becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 2, particularly under global groupings and agreements involving India or affecting India's interest under international relation. Now, moving to this news on page number 6, it highlights about paying tribute to Alluri Sitarama Raju, and this has been highlighted by India's president. She says that pay tribute to Alluri Sitarama Raju by imbibing his values. The message to be drawn from the life of the tribal warrior is to work selflessly and fearlessly for the well-being of the deprived sections of the society. His struggle against injustice is a proud chapter in India's freedom struggle. So you need to know about Alluri Sitaram Raju and also his participation in India's national freedom movement. So it highlights that the President of India has paid tribute to Alluri Sitaram Raju, the freedom fighter, at the closing ceremony of his 125th birth anniversary in Hyderabad. Alluri Sitaram Raju was influential Indian revolutionary who played a significant role in country's struggle for independence. And his efforts are remembered to improve the lives of Adivasi communities of India, as it has left a lasting impact on Indian history. Now, he was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi's non-cooperation movement, as he initially encouraged tribals to seek justice in local panchayat courts and also advocated boycott of colonial courts. However, all these measures failed to remove their suffering, that is, suffering of tribals. And determined to make a difference, Raju decided to reside in the Adivasi areas of Eastern Ghats, especially the forest region along Vishakhapatnam and Godavari districts. He dedicated himself to the Adivasis who were living in dire poverty and facing exploitation by the police, forest officials, and also revenue authorities. Now, Raju provided much needed support to the Adivasis through education and medical assistance, and he also utilized the knowledge he had acquired during his extensive travels. Now, Raju also learned from the Adivasis and combined their time-tested war methods with his own tactics, creating a formidable resistance against the British. And in August 1922, he launched the Rampa Rebellion, gaining substantial local support and successfully evading British authorities for an extended period. Now, recognizing his courage and indomitable spirit, he was bestowed with the title Manyam Virudu, which means Hero of the Jungle. And every year on July 4th, the government of Andhra Pradesh commemorates his birth date as state festival, honoring his contributions to nation's freedom struggle. Now, this particular question was asked in the prelims of 2020, and the question was, with reference to the history of India, Ul-Gulan or the Great Tumult is the description of which of the following events? Options were A. The Revolt of 1857, B. The Mappila Rebellion of 1921, C. The Indigo Revolt of 1859-60, and D. Birsa Munda's Revolt of 1899 and 900. So here the correct answer was D, that is Birsa Munda's Revolt of 1899 and 1900. And on similar lines, questions can also be asked with respect to the Rampa Rebellion. Now, the Rampa Rebellion, also known as Manyam Rebellion, was a significant tribal uprising led by Sri Raju in the Godavari Agency of Madras Presidency. This rebellion spanned from August 1922 to May 1924, and this rebellion marked a critical chapter in the fight against British colonial rule. The rebellion commenced in August 1922, taking the form of guerrilla warfare. So Mr. Raju did not completely follow the message of Mahatma Gandhi of non-violence. The tribal fighters led by Sri Raju proved resilient against British suppression efforts, and the prevalence of diseases in the region to which tribal people had developed immunity further impacted or hindered colonial authorities' attempts to quell the rebellion. And in this regard, Sri Raju's leadership must be commemorated, as he harnessed the discontent of the tribal communities, combining anti colonial zeal along with accommodation for sympathetic Muttadars. And Raju's followers mainly comprised tribal members, but he also garnered support from influential individuals within the Muttadar class. While some Muttadars remained ambivalent, that is, hostile, Raju's overarching vision of liberation from colonial rule united all these disparate groups. So, with respect to this news, you need to know about the freedom struggle led by Sri Alluri Sitaram Raju and also his contribution in the Rampa rebellion.